Back to the 0 point energy and why the government will want to suppress it. I mean, we've talked about, and they're also in your documentaries as well. That, I mean, you're taking, I mean, let's talk about how ExxonMobil, plays into this.
Well, all of the big financial, BlackRock, Goldman Sachs, J.P. Morgan Chase, the big oil, petrodollar, all that, is they understand that they want to keep the status quo or tinker around the edges with what I call the pseudo-environmental initiatives, like a Tesla car that you plug in. Well, you have, hundreds of pounds of lithium-ion batteries that are toxic in how they're made and disposed of, charging off a gas and coal-fired grid. People don't think, they think it's free energy. No, you're plugging into a grid that's smokestacks and maybe nuclear if you're lucky. Very little of it is wind and solar. 12%, something. So the problem is it has such a huge impact macroeconomically. But I would correct one thing. It's not the U.S. government doing anything. Like the U.S. government, I would say virtually no one in the Congress and the Pentagon or White House know about those technologies. So they're not suppressing them. But are there people under cover of the authority of government doing it? Yes. And that is the criminal aspect in the government. That is the rogue element in the government, whether it's the Patent Office or the Department of Justice or anyone. So they're deliberately, I would say the majority of the U.S. government, where you're left, right, center, would like to see a solution to the energy and environmental and poverty problems around the world. But of course, there are a lot of pigs feeding at the trough of the lobbyist money from the impacted industries, because we're talking hundreds of trillions of dollars in assets that are tied up in oil, gas, coal, nuclear, public utilities. I mean, you'd look at the Fortune 500 list of companies globally, not to mention nation states, But, I always point out we've had a 150-year run of that old smokestack technology. These others should have begun to come out 100 years ago and transitioned over. Now we're hitting up a red line, not only geophysically, but geopolitically, where you have half the world in poverty. And let's face it, if everyone in the world where you've been and I've been lived like you and I do, the price of a gallon of gasoline would be $150 a gallon. If they were using the kind of energy that you and I use, and it was all 8 billion souls on Earth. So the only way to solve the human future issue and geopolitical problems is to allow these technologies to begin to be phased in that at least, create energy, even if we hold back the things that fly. I think these electrogravitics need to be held back.
I mean, what I'm trying to do is bring to the light how many corporations would be pissed off if we did hit 0 point energy. The gas industry, the power industry.
Oh, sure.
The car industry.
It's huge.
Everyone.
Well, the car energy would just have to pivot to the type of motor and an electric motor with a 0 point generator and a little teeny 3-volt battery will start it up. You don't need these lithium-ion ginormous battery banks. Those can be retrofitted. But yes, your public utilities eventually will retire because every home business will have its own energy source. Your big fossil fuel, oil, gas, coal, nuclear power plants, they will all be mothballed. Now, the only thing you'd really need oil for is chemicals, petrochemicals, plastics, things like that. So that is something, though, it's not going to happen instantaneously. As I said earlier, this is like a global Marshall Plan to rebuild the planet and regain this 100 years of lost social evolution for our civilization. But we've squandered 100 years. And I don't think we have 100 years left to fix it. I don't think we have 20. So I think that well within your lifetime, and probably mine if I live old enough, certainly my grandchildren, we're going to need to have this established and done or we're going to be in a true existential crisis. So you have multiple crises coming in at once. You know, the secrecy around UFOs, which is part and parcel keeping secret these technologies, right? And who is that benefiting? A handful of elites, super elites. Now, your average guy working at a utility plant or in an oil field, those are going to need to be supported and retrained to these new high-tech industries dealing with making this whole new system. And I think, you know, we need to be very compassionate about the fact that there will be people displaced.
Well, at the same time, though, everything that we know will be a lot more affordable because it will not take the energy that it takes to produce all these things right now. That energy will be free.
That's the biggest component. You think about the energy it goes into digging the raw materials up, manufacturing it, shipping it to a place where it's assembled, shipping it again, and then delivering it to your store or your home, and everything from the delivery vans and jets to the manufacturing process is running on the current energy system. Mm-hmm. So yes, when the energy costs go to zero after you have a device that's operative, then you're looking at the ability to have extraordinary abundance. And this is the tide that will lift all the boats in the third world and developing world also, by the way. And it's sort of like how they leapfrog from landlines like we used to have, right, to sell, they just bypass the landlines. The rest of the world will be able to go from having nothing in the way of energy generation, 3 billion people have no power energy at all, to having these systems. And suddenly you're going to see so much happen in the world that is going to be a human advancement. And aside from the air and everything becoming pristine and clean, there are going to be such great opportunities for, you know, the dispossessed people of the world, which I think if you don't pay attention to that, this is how you end up in disgruntled segments of the population in the world that later become terrorists or adversaries. So I think looking at this in the largest possible way, you know, it's a win-win for everyone if we take care of the workers that would be displaced. As for the mega giant corporate entities, they just need to pivot to these new technologies and realize that era is over.